that length of line. Also, the right-of-way for that single 75-foot pole would be 60 feet. For the set of 3 poles, it would be 95. So you're adding a bigger swath of right-of-way. Also, because the poles are so much shorter, in terms of this being an agricultural area, we would severely limit the use of that agricultural area because you can't put anything underneath that at that point. Does that help answer your question?
It does exactly.
Okay.
Okay, let's go back to our, I think that's a great point. Let's go back to our list. Okay, let's go to the next one, 4. Okay, the visual and safety, that's why I was asking earlier about engineering versus visual. I think visual can be subjective. And whether it's 349 footers or 170 or 80 footer, reasonable minds could differ, but you've explained, I think, and there's some conditions about the use of materials and reducing heights and quantities and locations, all that. I think you're addressing that. Is it consistent with the general plan? You know, I'm not going to comment on that. I think you've got a balance. Yes, growth is consistent with the general plan, but there are also references to preserving the rural character. So we're back to that same question, okay? Let's go to the next one. Conditions, we've talked about that. Okay, has the Army Corps, for number 7, has the Army Corps actually weighed in on this?
Yeah, we did a wetland delineation. They accepted the delineation, and we submitted a work plan for a plan of development for the area subject to their jurisdiction that came to our group.
Okay, and I'm going to come back to this later in another question. Go to number 8. Okay, when it says no financial burden on the county as proposed, perhaps that's the case, or surrounding properties. There are a number of residential properties that are concerned that what you're proposing is going to diminish their value materially. How do you respond to that?
Well,
so it may not, my point being, it may not hit the county, Wasatch County as an entity's checkbook or pocketbook or whatever, but there are people who say, this is gonna cost me money.
Yeah, so we submitted a CH2M Hill study as part of the record in our application that dealt with the impacts of transmission lines. People will frequently throw out extremely large numbers, 20, 30, 40% of impacted property values. The data that we've seen doesn't bear that out. We don't have to obtain easements in subsections. I mentioned that before. It's going to be the taking, if you will, as it relates to easements for the use across that property. There's obviously a financial component with that, and depending on the existence or lack of existence of existing lines, all of those kinds of things feed into that, and it's a case-by-case basis. We need to have necessary easement rights to cross those properties. There's a financial component with that. As far as, so tying that financial side to the question that you asked, and then also the report that we submitted for CH2M Hill, it really doesn't, the data doesn't bear out.
So and this is important because these are our neighbors and friends, and that are, some of them are going to be really feel strongly about this. You put a big giant pole next to my house or across the street, whatever it is, along my property line or just in my neighborhood, you're going to cost me money. Are you going to address that on a case-by-case basis and work with these people? What's the process?
Yeah, on a property-by-property basis, we have to review whether or not there are existing easement rights and what those rights are, and if additional rights are needed. So I can't give you sort of like a carte blanche statement of, this is how everything's going to be dealt with, because we really don't know. It's going to be property by property. If there's no transmission line at all, it's going to be treated differently.
But if somebody says you've rendered my house worthless,
Yeah.
You're going to counter and say, well, not actually, it's this, and there's going to be
There's a
some back
negotiation.
and forth process.
In addition, and we have to provide this information as we enter negotiations, there's an ombudsman's office of the state who specifically deals with these types of conflicts.
It's a state, not a HL&P, it's not a Rocky Mountain Power. It's the state comes in and says, this is going to happen, this is your house, let's figure it out.
I'm going to pull somebody else up if Harold's around. Yeah, it would be worthwhile to talk about the ombudsman process, but I won't jump into that.
This is a big deal. This is a big deal for a lot of people. Ambiance aside, there are people who feel extremely strongly it will hit their personal pocketbooks. So for number 8, I can't just, personally, I can't just say, there's no burden on the county or surrounding properties. I think there probably is a burden on certain properties. I don't know what it is. I don't know whose property specifically. I don't even care, but my point is, it would be helpful for everyone, all of us, to understand what happens when somebody says, you just destroyed the value of my home.
So one of the questions, and if I don't summarize this properly, go ahead and step in. One of the questions is, if we go and collect any easements where easements are needed, someone approaches us and says, hey, we think there's a gigantic financial value. I mentioned the ombudsman, we provide information on the ombudsman. Can you walk everyone through that process of how it works?
You should know your name and what your job, your title, or your role is.
And I'm happy to do that. Harold Dudley, right away with Rocky Mountain Power. And I apologize, I was downstairs so I could hear better. So there was the 30, there's a 30-second delay. So I was listening, but I didn't catch the last 45 seconds. So if you can just repeat that question one more time.
We've got friends, neighbors, family,
Right.
fellow members of our community who feel exceptionally strongly, are convinced that this project is going to cost them in their personal pocketbooks. And we're doing this in the context of what's the financial impact and how do we mitigate it to grant you a CUP. Okay? So if somebody comes to you and says, you just destroyed value in my home, what happens?
Okay, very good, and I can walk through that. And we, likewise, I do this every day. This is my profession. This is what I do for a job, is meet with those same family and friends and people in your community and other communities, establishing the value of the impact or the take of that easement across that property. And I want to be very clear, it's on the easement across the property. If the easement or the impact does not touch that property, I'm not prepared or I'm not addressing that situation. It's when the easement touches or the line touches that property. We meet with folks. We try and explain where the poles are going to go and some of those things that we talked about in these meetings. We give an opportunity for them to talk to us about that impact their property. What are their plans with their property? We've had situations, unbeknownst to us at times, they may have had a sprinkler pivot that they had planned within a few years. We take those considerations in, and in that time we work back and forth, attempting to come to a mutual resolution as to the impact and the cost of that easement crossing their property. We do that in their homes. We meet with them. We do. Now sometimes, most often, very frequently, we get to a mutual agreement as to the cost or that impact across their property. If we're unable to, there's been several avenues. Number one, in the state of Utah, we have a property rights ombudsman's office. During the negotiations, we notify that particular landowner of the property rights ombudsman's office and make available to them their publications and their information so that they can contact them independently. That ombudsman office then can provide them with some information and things that they need so they don't have to, at that point, go to an attorney or a legal entity. That's something the state set up. It's been very helpful for both property owners and for government entities use Wasatch County. Many government entities use them. Additionally, another option, and through the Ombudsman Office or independently, we hire an appraiser, an independent third-party appraiser, to do an appraisal of that property and the impact to the property and the easement cost across the property. And we'll do that either on an individual basis or a global basis. But I guess in summary is that we do meet, we do talk, we look at all the impacts to that property. We're trying to come up with a fair market value. Ultimately, if we can't come to a reasonable, and I say fair market value, I shouldn't have said it that way, a reasonable amount, then we turn to an appraiser and come up with a fair market value for that.
Can I interject? I think he's asking a different question. I think we all understand that in order to acquire an easement, you're going to have to pay for it. And presumably, that's going to be market value or whatever the property owner wants. But I think Mr. Hendrick is asking about, related to the slide you see up here, is I don't think there's any question there's going to be some impact of surrounding property values. I'm not talking about the easement. I'm talking about you just put a pole in my neighborhood, and the next buyer of my home is going to look at that pole where it wasn't there before and say, hey, I don't like your house as much as I did. So there's some impact. I think, and I forgot Ben, I think Ben partially addressed that by saying I have a study in the application that states with empirical evidence that that impact is less than what many believe it to be. I don't have those numbers in front of me. I don't know what Commissioner Hendrick is asking if there's anything else other than that you plan on doing to mitigate the impact on surrounding property values, not the easement, not the owner that are selling you the land. Are you suggesting you're going to be paying compensation to people who claim that their property values are diminished? Because I don't think that's what you're saying. That's kind of what it sounded like.
Yeah, that's what it sounded like.
No. So the only people who will be paying compensation to are those the land you actually purchased by way of easement.
Correct. Thank you if I led you to believe anyone. You stated it correctly for me. Thank you.
Do you anticipate there being a legal taking in any of these cases? That's going to be an issue at all? You understand what I mean by that?
Repeat the question.
I mean, I'm somewhat familiar with the takings laws, and the only instance where someone would be entitled to compensation if there is a legal taking under the Constitution. My reading of that law is pretty narrow. There are very narrow circumstances where a taking occurs, but that's not something that you're anticipating compensating anyone in this room or any other homeowner for. Is that right?
I'm not sure I'm following the question.
I'm going to try.
You try.
This is the problem when you have lawyers talking. Here's the question. Not an easement, doesn't touch my property.
Right.
You just ruined my neighborhood with this project. What's my recourse? That's it.
Okay.
I live a block away, but I have to drive under. Whatever my rationale is for not liking the project and feeling that it cost me because it's in my neighborhood. Or you can just keep it simple. It's across the street from my property line. Do I have any recourse with you? Rocky Mountain Power, Heber Line Power, or anybody else? Because I feel like you made my neighborhood ugly.
No, and I believe that the purpose of this meeting is those kind of discussions, but as far as compensation, that comes through the easement.
Okay, way back when we started this, weren't you going to use the existing poles that went across the route? It was a different alignment than you show us tonight. But weren't you going to use, not up in the North Fields part where the cows and something, but once you got into Heber City and headed toward Midway, weren't we using existing poles?
Well, yeah.
And they were going to be tall.
Yeah. Once we hit the south line where we currently have a south 46 kV line, we will be following that route all the way.
And we'll use those same poles. They'll just be taller.
Well,
Or I mean, they'll be new taller poles.
They'll be taller poles. Yeah.
but and I don't know if Commissioner Hendricks is a taller pole, does a taller pole diminish the value of property more than a short pole?
Yeah, but
They're wider too.
I think there will be people who feel that, but you're going to use an existing right-of-way, so.
Right. And I don't know if we want to get into, I want to get into this, but as it goes up Ward's Lane, those poles will get taller.
Yes.
But they're already there.
Yes.
Okay. That's all.
Is a CUP where you required there, where it's not a new pole?
Yes.
I thought that the code just said a new pole of a certain height. Maybe I'm mistaken.
Anything over 45.
Yes.
But a lot of the residential impact, am I wrong on this? The routing I see, there's a lot of residential or arguable residential impact is really in Midway City as opposed to county.
Yes.
Okay, what's Midway City doing or said?
We've been to one commission meeting, planning commission meeting there.
So have you formally
It got
applied with them?
continued, yes.
And when's your hearing date?
We had a hearing date a couple weeks ago, and it got continued. We got to go back to them with some answers on right-of-way and that type of stuff.
What happens, I personally can't I've never quite understood, although I kind of can guess, why there isn't one hearing for the whole project, and it would have the County Planning Commission and Midway City and Heber, and we're all together. Because I'm a little bit worried this is, mom says go to bed, and my kids come to me because I say, yeah, sure, stay up, whatever. You'll be tired tomorrow, and you better learn that it's better to go to bed. You get one answer from one parent. We've got 3 parents of this project. And I'm very worried. Who's gonna blink first? And I have to be honest. I'm not fully apprised of how Midway City feels about this and what their concerns are. And what happens if Midway City says no, and we've said yes? Then what happens?
We just keep pursuing it. I have to do it. So we just keep pursuing it.
Do you understand what I'm saying?
I think I do. I think the thing that we're struggling with is, we're following the ordinance.
Right.
I don't know what else we're supposed to do. If we weren't following the ordinance, somebody would say, why aren't you following the ordinance? So, we have an application with the county for this particular project. A lot of people may do a lot of different things, and that's really, there are a lot of different ways that can go. If there's a denial, I don't know that we're prepared to answer it. I don't know if it's really germane to the decision that's before.
Right. What you're saying is keep your nose in your own business and don't worry about the other jurisdictions, which is, I think, a fair comment.
I think that was a little nicer than that.
I think part of
all right. I'm not being
I think part of the issue is the ordinances that govern each of those 3 entities is different. In fact, I think
All
Midway
3
didn't even have an ordinance until recently. So, the Heber City ordinance is different, and they are beholden to their own constituents, and their needs may be different. So legally, I don't think it is by even.
My point with number 8 and this concern of diminution of value of properties, I don't know that I can agree that it's no financial burden. I think there is a financial burden. I don't know that in and of itself makes the decision for us. But as we go through 10 factors that we're obligated to consider, that's one, and maybe 9 are fine. Every commissioner is entitled to their own view of all these.
Let's not leave this.
Okay.
Would there be a valuation differential from going overhead or underground? I mean, if In other words, he's asking, okay, you've devalued my property because these lines go overhead. I might say, I got the same problem, even if they're in the ground.
Yeah, I think it probably depends on how you want to use your land, right?
What's the difference? 6 of one, that doesn't have another?
Visual.
No. Just the
Visual.
Just the visual.
I think most people would focus on the visual. I don't know about radiation and lower SAT
Yes,
scores.
that's not good. But yeah, I just wonder, I mean, when you go to sell the property, you go, well, I can see these lines, says, well, you don't, what you don't see are the transmission.
Well, utility easements are utility easements. They're either there or they're not, you know, underground or above.
Right, okay.
And I'll just refer back to the fact that we provided the CH2ML study that looked into that and say that the data doesn't bear out that there are big financial impacts to neighboring properties. That's been submitted.
Next.
More questions, okay. I'm going to skip this one because I think we covered it. Oh, slides 32 and it's also on 38. Yeah, okay, the second bullet point talks about you've met with all these entities. Yeah, okay. My point is there's all these coordinate, it's the same point. There's all these coordinating entities and I'm not sure we actually know what all these other ones are saying. Just the fact that you've reviewed it doesn't mean, hey, everybody's on board with this project because we've showed it to them. I don't know if the Mountain Land Association of Governments has taken a strong no position or not. That's my only point with this, is we don't really know what they said. I'm assuming.
We've just been coordinating with them on the bypass route and making sure that we stay out of their way.
Okay, fair, that's fair.
Yeah, and I think, you know, as far as these meetings that we've had, you know, the Corps of Engineers, et cetera, a lot of these things deal with what's actually within their jurisdiction of review, right? So I think it becomes a challenge, you know, you want to consider a bunch of environmental things. Well, what ruler will you get out and measure against if we're following the EPA guidelines? What is the standard that you would then apply us against? So, you know, as far as jurisdictions are concerned, we are coordinated as required.
Okay. With regard, it's on slide 35, the study for future needs. And we all understand the difficulty with the crystal ball, but I know just from the county perspective, there is a huge growth plan. So, for example, the Sorensen property, which doubles the county when it's all fully built out, doubles the size of the county. So of the known growth, have you considered that? Does this take care of, for example, Sorensen and Mayflower and Jordanelle?
That was one of the studies that the board requested, was that load growth analysis.
Right.
And so we commissioned Utility Financial Services out of Michigan, who does data analytics for utilities. They did a full report on where they thought that our ultimate loads would end up, and based on, you know, a University of Utah population growth study, some census material data they were able to gather, and also out of some think tanks in Washington. And they combined all that. They let the board kind of pick and choose, you know, which exact population growth parameter to go with. I think the board chose the University of Utah's as being the most accurate. And, you know, it's really hard to know, but our current growth as a bedroom community where the majority of our load is coming in as houses and, you know, small general service like Walmart's, or, you know, we might get a Target or something like that. This would project us to being, you know, very good until we're at 40 megawatts now, so our load could double to plus 80 megawatts.
Which is a population of approximately how big?
It's doubling our population with load. You know, I mean, it's doubling our load.
I think that's already been approved. Don't we have, Doug, something, approved projects that are already kind of double?
Well, Sorensen, for example,
In theory.
5,700 units. By 2050, we're anticipating to double our population to about 60,000.
And keep in mind that, you know, us and Rocky Mountain Power kind of split Wasatch County as far as the customers we serve. So my company's not, you know, this substation and everything isn't going to help the people up in North Jordanelle area. But the project helps Rocky Mountain Power serve those load growths. And so, you know, I do think, like I said before, this is a generational type project. My hope is that we can contain growth enough that we don't have to do another project like this until I'm dead and gone, like the general manager before me is dead and gone that did the last big generational type thing. So.
If we vote yes, we may be dead and gone sooner than we So this is a generational project, and its impact is going to affect all of us and all of our kids and our grandkids in this whole valley for a long time. So
yeah,
that's why it's important to understand and air all these legitimate concerns. And they're not. It's not to me the code provision aren't as clean as what's the impact? Oh, there's no impact. You can't just say that. There are impacts, and we've got to be honest and talk about it. That's the job. That's the whole point of this process. Okay, I'm done. Sorry. Mr. Chairman, I yield the floor.
Thank you. Appreciate your comments and questions. Any other questions?
Just a question or two about the location of the substation. I know at one point they were looking at.
Can you turn your microphone on, please?
I always forget to do this. At one point, we were looking at locating the substation near South Oak Road in the north line. And I think even maybe on some property already owned by the county, or Heber Light and Power somewhere over there. Where did those discussions go?
Well, the original proposal was on Heber Light and Power property, right between our operations area and the event center. So we own property right in between there. We were working with the county, you know, to best align it, you know, on kind of a land swap so that we weren't right up against the event center. Discussions went on. The previous two boards that I had were okay with that location. When I had a board changeover in January 2018. They really challenged me to find a different place to put that. They felt it was very impactful for that area, for the train, where a lot of visitors come in, for county recreation area where a lot of visitors come in. So I diligently did that. I went out and we talked to a lot of landowners along that south line route. And, you know, I eventually had a landowner that was willing to sell. So we bought it.
So the primary concerns in not locating it there, safety related?
By the event center there?
Correct.
You know, there's multiple concerns.